We're going to cover a whole lot and a broad spectrum of functionality here. So unlike most of the how-to webinars where we're digging into specific feature sets, we're not going to do that today. So try not to be overwhelmed with the bouncing around. The goal is really to give you that broad view of various things that you can do within the product, not to kind of explain exactly how each feature works. The product has evolved a lot. We've been around now, I think this is our 36th year, and it was originally kind of a license management tool that ran in the background and you never even looked at it. And then as the software publishing industry has changed, the main use case probably 10 years ago was for more broad-based usage tracking in addition to some of that active license management. And so our clients started getting deployed to more and more computers throughout our customers' environments for that license optimization around that software asset management use case. And then as the product was deployed more broadly, and our client gathers all these hardware details in addition to software information, we got more and more requests that were really in the hardware inventory management space. And over the last 3 or 4 years, that's been the primary focus of virtually all of our development, lifecycle management, inventory management. And so what that means is a lot more users get involved, and there's custom roles and some built-in roles for various user types. So again, as I go through the interface, keep in mind, no one person is expected to know this entire process. We just want to give you an idea of what the scope of what the product is capable of, because many customers are either new and aren't fully aware of everything it does, or even long-term customers that purchased it maybe 15 or 20 years ago for a specific use case may not have much of an idea of how to use a lot of this new stuff. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the interface and talk about the first thing. Of course, if you go back 10 years, the only reason for a computer record to be in here was because the client was installed and we were monitoring usage. As we have broadened the scope of functionality, there's a lot of other reasons for hardware to be here for inventory management purposes, whether or not it has the client installed. So in addition to deploying our client and having computers pop up automatically, there's a lot of other ways to get hardware into the system, whether it's computers, mobile devices like tablets or cell phones, or even printers and monitors, networking devices, and other kinds of IT equipment. So importing is a big thing that people will do these days to get various assets in, including computers that maybe have been purchased and haven't been received yet. Sometimes you want to get the inventory in so you can begin that lifecycle management prior to deploying the client and beginning the actual hardware process. So before we dive into the hardware or computer records or any of the other features, the first thing we're going to look at today is purchases. Most customers are not using purchase records even today. So I'm going to come to this purchases tab, and we're going to talk about two things. One is importing purchases, and another is manually creating purchases. Purchase imports, for the most part, are typically done around software. I don't see a lot of people importing, lists of previous or past hardware purchases. So I won't dive too deeply into that. If we're talking about hardware lifecycle and inventory, there's really a couple of ways to manually create a purchase record here. One is kind of the default way. Up at the top, I can click this plus icon. It's going to ask me for a little bit of information about a purchase record. And then when I fill this out, it will take me into the purchase details page here, where I can continue populating information. That's kind of the standard way. There's actually another way that you can do this as well, that allows you to incorporate a custom view. So currently, if I were to manually create a purchase record back on that main purchases page, we would come here where this default view is. These tabs are on the left side. We've got pre-configured fields that may not be in the arrangement that you want. So in addition to doing that default approach, what I want to show you is that on the dashboard, you can actually create a new purchase widget here that asks for the same kind of information up front, where I can type in a PO number. But if I go into the settings here, what I want you to see is that I can associate this record with a form. Okay, so now if I actually go and populate this to create a new purchase record, when I click create, instead of being taken to that default view, I've got a customized view here where the specific fields in the specific arrangement I want have been added to this page for creating a new purchase record. We'll talk a little bit about forms a little bit later here, but I just wanted to show you that approach to adding purchases into the system is available to you, and it kind of gives you more control over exactly what you're going to see and how you're going to fill that out. I think there's a newer video on creating these forms on that tutorials page, so you might have a look there. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time adding details to this purchase I just created. We're going to come back out and just kind of pick one of these pre-existing purchases. They're not really going to have a whole lot of information, and that's okay. But let's just grab this one here. What I want to do is show you, once the purchase record has been created, there is this hardware tab where you can link the computers or other devices to the purchase record. So from the purchase, I can link out to the hardware, and from this hardware details page, I can actually see a link to the purchase where I can go back into the purchase. So how do you establish that link within the web UI between the purchase record and the hardware? So what we're going to do is I'll kind of show you. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to right click on this purchase name, and it allows me to copy that value. And now I can come back out to the computers page and find that list of computers. If I've imported them, they might be here on this imported tab or under this imported login type. And there's some other things I'll talk about locating and organizing computers on this page. But let's just assume, for the sake of explanation here, these were the purchases or the computers that were part of that purchase record. I can just right click on this, choose quick edit, and then add the purchase field. And now if I paste in that purchase, I see it listed here. And if I select it and apply, the next step here is to actually attach those devices to that purchase record. Now, if I come back to the purchases page, search for that purchase, I can go in and see those computers are listed as linked to that purchase record. I won't go any deeper into purchases here. There's some more information that is available in documentation and things, but that's kind of the beginning of the hardware lifecycle, right? You've purchased some computers. Maybe you haven't even received them, but you've gotten an asset report, spreadsheet with some serial numbers and other information. And that kind of takes me to the next subject here, which is importing computer records. Like I said, traditionally, you will have received the computers and deployed our client to them, and that's when they show up here. But these days, you might want to get them in here for inventory management purposes prior to deploying the client. So on the computers page, if I come to the Import Computers tab, you just want a CSV file that contains the records. And so I'm just going to drag this report right into this tab here. And you see that opens up this field mapping process where you go through and you can select the fields from the spreadsheet and which database field to link them to. So this is OEM serial. I'll select that. And then once you get through this process, you can actually save a field map, which I've previously done. So if I open up this instructions, I see there's a Dell asset report field map already here. So this is a previously saved field map. So then once I kind of am ready to import those, I just click import. When you import computers, they will then show up in this imported category, right? And we've got a long list here from previously imported tablets, but normally if this was the first time, you would just see the computers that you imported, and that's probably these. So from there, I've got a little bit of detail in those computer records, but I might want to populate some more information. One thing to note and be aware of is this imported login type does not consume any of your seats. So you're only consuming seats with the dedicated and leased login types. Anything you import doesn't use any of your AllSight seats unless and until you install the client. So that's what makes this tool really great for asset inventory management, because other products that are specifically for IT asset management inventory will often charge you per line item or per item in the database. You can manage all the inventory you want in AllSight, and it's essentially free, except for those that have the client deployed, where you're also monitoring usage and tracking logins. Okay, so these are the 4 that we imported. I can right-click on this again and choose Quick Edit. And in this case, I've already associated some with that purchase, so I'll get rid of that. And I can add any additional details in bulk for virtually any of the database fields associated with the computer. And I can actually add multiple. So if I wanted to modify the lifecycle stage, default is deployed. So you might change this to stocked or ordered in this case. Other fields are available here as well. If they were not part of my original import, I can then update them in bulk right here on the computers page. Okay. Another way of importing computers into the system, besides a manual CSV import that a lot of customers are using, are actually our Jamf and Intune integrations. But here on the scripts page, you'll see, if you look for it, there's a script for importing devices from Jamf and another for importing from Intune. And that can be computers or mobile devices. So you can import and use those scripts to create devices here on the computers page, or you could use those to populate additional details about computers that are in here, but maybe some of these asset related fields need to be populated from information coming in from Intune or Jamf. So those are the 2 kind of main use cases for the Jamf and Intune imports. Okay, so a couple of other scripts worth mentioning here at the beginning of this hardware replacement process or hardware inventory lifecycle process are, if I come back to the scripts, you'll see that there is one here for gathering warranty dates. This one has been very popular the last few years, and it's because you can set this up to run regularly on a schedule. So once it's configured, it can just run on in the background, and any new computers that come in will automatically have their warranty dates populated. And we actually look up the warranty date directly from Dell, HP, Lenovo, and Microsoft Surface devices. And if we go into this, you'll see Dell does require an API key, and as well as HP. So for those manufacturers, you'll need to get the API keys and populate them here. But for the most part, these are the options and settings, and that's just for populating the warranty date. You have some options for populating the purchase date as well. And that can happen entirely in the background from now and into the future as new computers come in. The Jamf and Intune scripts that I mentioned previously also have the ability to populate warranty date if that information is in those systems, of course. Okay. And then just to kind of show you what that can look like toward the end of the life cycle, back here, there are some widgets on the dashboard where you can display computers based on their warranty date or their replacement date. So here's a group of 222 computers that are due for replacement. One click will get me that list, which can then be exported to various file formats. So that's kind of one way to keep track of what's going on throughout the hardware lifecycle in an easy visual way. Okay. So another thing you might do when those computers are received. So these records have been imported and now they've been received. Okay, so part of your inventory process might be to attach an asset ID barcode, or you might add a QR code, a scannable QR code that takes you to the details page for a given computer. So imagine if you receive a bunch of computers in and you've imported them into the system, and now that you've imported them, they each have their own details page within AllSight. Well, this details page has its own URL. This URL can be converted to a QR code label that gets attached to the side of the device so that when you scan it, it takes you right to this details page here within AllSight. One thing I will show you is that that same barcode can also be scanned in the inventory app to confirm that that item is in its location later on down the life cycle when it's been deployed and it's out in that room or in that location and you want to confirm inventory. So those are the two use cases for a barcode that represents this detail URL. There is another script called export detail URLs. So this is a few steps to this process. This script is pretty simple, but with it installed, then on the computers page, I can select the computers that I want to create barcodes for, right click, and come down to scripts and choose to run this script. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to export a spreadsheet that is formatted to be then imported to the Avery website. Avery is a company that makes printable labels, so white labels on a page that you can then print to. And we have a blog post. I forgot to grab the URL to that, but if you go to our main homepage on our website in the top right corner and just search for Avery or QR codes, you should find a blog post that steps you through the process of taking that spreadsheet that we export with this script and creating QR code labels that you can easily apply to the individual equipment. That again will take you to the details page here or be used to quickly scan that equipment in during the inventory process. Okay, hope this is all making sense. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into how specifically step by step, but really cool stuff that you can do with this tool. And this is the kind of thing that most customers don't know about unless we tell them about it and kind of talk about how these things work. Okay. So I hope this is all making sense and you guys are following along. So that's before you've even deployed the client to the computers, perhaps when they first are received and you're taking them out of the box. You are creating these labels and applying them to the device. So now they're in your inventory. They're set to that stocked lifecycle stage. Maybe you know who you're assigning them to, maybe you don't, and that process can be done again pretty easily through quick edit. There is also another option here for assigning computers, which is another use case for forms. So going back a few minutes ago, I talked about creating a form that would allow you to create a purchase record with a custom view of purchase details. Well, the same is true for computer details. If I click on a computer record, I get a default view here that shows me a specific list of fields. And honestly, all of the computer fields aren't even listed throughout these tabs. There are at least a few computer fields that aren't part of the default view of computers. But let's say I wanted to assign a computer to a user using a form that just contains a few fields. I can come over here and right click on a computer, and we have a loaner use permit form that I can choose to click on that's got some content here. And this is an actual form that you might print and provide to a user. The idea here is I can populate the details that I need to populate. And then this can contain a signature that comes from another location within the tool. But then once this is all done and I click done, this does two things. One, it can be sent out in an email. It can trigger an action that sends a copy of this form out to the user as a confirmation that this device has been assigned to them. And it can also trigger other events that maybe change lifecycle stage and other things that happen to that computer. I'll get a little bit deeper into where and how you do that here in a few minutes, but I just wanted to kind of show you still, even before we have imaged this computer and deployed the client to it, we may know who it's going to be assigned to, and we can step through that process perhaps then. At this point, though, we're likely to be ready to image that computer and deploy it. Again, I'm going to reference the previous webinar we did that hardware replacement process where you actually step through some additional steps of looking at the old computer, what software is installed, what are the hardware details, to kind of make the decision of which computer you're going to replace the old one with. So I'm skipping some steps that might be involved in a replacement of an old computer just to talk about the new computer deployment process. So next step may be to deploy the client and gather all the hardware configuration details. At that point, an imported computer would then become either a dedicated or leased computer, depending on how you've got your system set up. The client is going to gather a lot of additional hardware configuration details that may not have been a part of the original import. And then, of course, you have the ability to populate some additional information, either manually or potentially automatically through a form or an action, which we'll talk about here in a bit. Okay, so now we're in kind of the standard stuff you probably already know about. Computer has the client installed. The client is going to track software, tell you what software is installed. You can decide what software you're going to track usage for. And of course, you've got all of the various reports, the login reports, the hardware configuration reports, software usage reports, and many other reports and types of reporting that you can do on a deployed computer that's out in the environment being used day to day. So I won't go too far into that. We're going to assume if you're using the product, you're doing something along those lines. That's the normal stuff, or the long-term historical stuff we've always done. But one thing I am going to show, because it's fairly new to the web interface here, is some of the things that were in the Key Configure admin console, but not in the web UI previously. The first one being the default view of this actually hides the computer counts. So if you expand this out, you'll see some additional information here about the different computer groups. I won't go into login types or talk too much about divisions, but I will say divisions are kind of that OU structure that you might expect to see in Active Directory. We've got an Active Directory integration that will pull in the OU structure automatically. But for cloud customers, a lot of times linking up with an on-prem AD instance isn't an option. And so there are some things that you can do around automating computers populating their divisions automatically. One is rules. So if I collapse the divisions and these tag-based maps, which I won't get into today, and we just look at filters, filters can just filter a view. So I can look at computers that have had no session in the last 90 days, for example, and this just filters my view. I can go to a one-time filter and kind of create a filter to look at or find computers that meet a certain criteria just on the fly. And then there's another filter type called a rule. And within a rule, you actually have the ability to set a division. So you could say something like, if the computer name prefix is XYZ, then set the division to the XYZ division. And then there's some other options here. So that's one approach to automating your divisions. Another approach is that that you could use the Intune script. I'm not sure if there is an equivalent function in the Jamf script as of today, but I know that if we go into the Intune script, that the field mapping does allow you to set the division. So you type your Intune field name here that you want to apply as your division. And I believe that can even create the divisions. And if you want or need this nested structure, a period in the division name is used as the separator. So development.graduate would create this structure here. And then the last thing I'll mention here in terms of computer organizational structure are what we call sections. Sections can't be created here in the web UI yet. Those are created in the Key Configure admin console. And these are top level groupings. So in a higher ed environment, that might be a campus or it might be a department. And then divisions go into a section. So if you're interested in potentially using that, the main use case or the most convenient use case for that is that administrators being assigned roles and accounts within the tool can easily be assigned a default division to their account. And then when they log in, they're restricted to only see the computers in their section. That's one of the main use cases of sections. You'll also see references to sections in purchase records, and you can also scope a software management policy to a section so that it only applies to the computers within that section. So again, I won't go any deeper than that, but divisions and sections have to do with how the computer records are organized within our product. Whereas within a computer record, the asset tab has more to do with the physical device, the physical location of the computer. A lot of times those things are going to mirror each other. Your divisions are often going to mirror your physical location, but that's how you can think about it. This asset tab contains information about the location of the physical device, and the computers page, the divisions have to do with how you're organizing the records, the digital records of those devices. Almost always those are going to mirror each other, but not always. So that's kind of why there's some redundancy there. I talked a little bit about filters. I won't go any deeper into that. You can create filters for all kinds of things, including some pretty complex filters that look at multiple attributes. Some of these built-in ones do that as well for like operating system upgrade readiness. Okay. And then the last section down here on this side column is tags. We tend to discourage tags. There's usually another better way of doing whatever you're trying to do with tags, but there are use cases for tags. So just be aware, if you're thinking about putting tags on computers, you might ask us if there's a better way. The reason I say that, tags function kind of like filters, except you have to manually apply them. So computers have to be manually assigned tags, and that can be done in bulk in some various ways, but it's still manual, which means manually maintaining it. New computers that need that tag need to be manually tagged. If you need to take the tag off of computers, you've got to come manually do that. So that's the reason we kind of discourage tags, but they're available to the extent that they might be the best way to do it, whatever it is you're trying to do. Coming back to reporting very briefly, just in case you're not aware, some changes to the report builder have happened in the last few revisions that allow you, like if I look at, let's take a logins report division by computer, I can actually target not just divisions and computers here now, but I can even target filters, for example. So if I wanted to use a target of no session in the last 90 days, maybe I wanted to create a report that runs automatically on a monthly basis. And I won't dig too deep into the report builder here, but I could create a scheduled report that gets emailed out to a bunch of users as a text file attachment or a PDF attachment that shows me all the computers that haven't had a session in the last 90 days, and it just shows up in my inbox once a month. So that sort of thing kind of ties into that day-to-day management or maintenance for your hardware inventory. And that is a very deep rabbit hole that we could get into reporting and various kinds of reporting gymnastics with all the different configuration options and settings here. If you've got a need or a thought and you need assistance, well, how do I can set it up to do this or that? Always feel free to reach out. We're happy to help with that sort of thing. So I won't go any deeper into reporting during the webinar. Another thing that kind of ties into some of the things that we've talked about is a relatively new feature called actions. You can think of an action as an automated workflow. Okay, so if this happens, then I want these other things to happen automatically. I don't want to have to manually do these other things. An example of that is the change to the lifecycle stage. This is an action called retire computer. It was manually created. There's no actions in the system by default. But what this does is it looks for, or it's triggered on, changes to the lifecycle stage field. If there is a change made to the lifecycle stage field, then that triggers this action, and the action checks to see, did the lifecycle stage get changed to retired? If the answer to that is yes, then that makes these additional changes and changes the login type to dormant, which frees up that AllSight seat, and it sets the division to retired. Okay, so that's an example of an action. That's one type of action to make changes to a computer. There are 4 types of actions. You can send emails, you can call a webhook in a third-party tool, you can make changes to the computer like this one does, or you can have actions for devices as well. I haven't really talked about devices, but that is a separate page here where your printers and your monitors and your storage drives and keyboards and docking stations and networking devices might go. And then triggers can include changes to fields like the lifecycle stage field or any other field. And another newer feature is that the submitting of a form can trigger an action. So I showed you that loaner use permit form previously, where you're going to assign a computer to a user with that form. You hit submit, it sends an email out to that user because you have triggered an action, which is a send mail on event action. And then once you've got it set up so that submitting that specific form triggers an action, then down here, you've got the email message that's going to get sent out. And then you can attach that form as a part of that email. So you actually get a PDF attachment with some options here. So your computer comes in, you put the QR code on it, you deploy the image, install the client, make sure it's here in AllSight. Then you can use that form to assign it to a user, send a copy of that email to that user automatically that contains the form attached as a PDF. And that can also go to an administrator or some other account where you keep records of those stored PDFs. So a lot of possibility, a lot of potential here in terms of depth of this functionality when you start to stack the different pieces together. Okay, a couple of other actions you'll see, things that people have asked about in the past, and we'll look at this RAM changed one as just another example of an action. In this case, we're just looking for any change to RAM size. Match all events means any change to this field will trigger this action. This action sends an email with the subject RAM size changed to this email address, and it just has this information. Amount of RAM in this object name will look up the computer that was changed, and it changed from this to that, which is looking at the history events to populate the details in this form. And then that gets sent out to an administrator, notifying them, hey, RAM changed in one of our computers out there on the network. That's another kind of popular one. As you can see, this is extremely open-ended in terms of its capability. You can build an action to automate all kinds of things. We haven't even thought of a tiny fraction of what it's capable of, but it's one of those things that is very powerful. There's some error checking and loop checking in. You could theoretically create a loop with actions. It should discover those things and shut them down. Reach out to us for questions about how to configure. There's a lot of depth, a lot of possibilities, and we're really just trying to show you the scope of what those possibilities are here. Reach out if you have any questions about something, an idea you have, or something you might want to do. And then coming back just to look at the forms really quickly, this is the area under settings where you can actually manually build a custom view for computers, whether that is something like this helper, which is just a view that you might assign to an account. So just to mention or explain that a little bit more, again, by default, if I click on a computer record and I have the ability to access computer details, given my account role, I'm going to get this default view. But maybe you want to assign access to a user that you want to control the view that they see when they click on a computer. You can do that. You can build a form which serves as a custom view. As an administrator with the default view, I have to right click to access it, but a user could be given this as their default. So when they click the computer name, they get that custom view. So that's another use case for forms. And then you can kind of control whether it opens in edit mode or not. By default, things like the department, the building, the room number, these are just text fields that you can type anything you want into. There is a way not only to create dropdowns, custom dropdowns for these fields, but to actually make dependencies between your selections. There we go. So in this case, region, location, building, and room number all have their own custom options with dependencies. So if I choose New England and I open up location, I see New England locations. If I choose a location, then based on that location, I get a list of specific buildings that are in that location. And then if I choose rooms, I get a list of rooms. There is a function in Quick Edit now where if I go in and select the room, in Quick Edit, I'm going to see this long list of all of the rooms from all of the buildings and all the locations. I can select a room from this long list of rooms, and when I go to apply it, it knows the dependencies. So this room suite 779 is in the Crystal River building in this Tampa, Florida location in the Southeast region. So that's another kind of cool new feature that's on the way, tying into these dependencies. Change the building, and it's gonna kind of work its way up that dependency and auto-populate the other fields for you. We've talked about actions, we've talked about forms, we've talked about dependent fields, which if we go to the settings page, just to show you one last thing on that, is on the columns tab. There is a way to create a CSV file that you can drag and drop that will actually create those dependencies. So you don't have to manually create this really kind of ugly, overwhelming formatting. You build out a CSV file, drag and drop that in, and it will create and populate these with the dependencies. Moving toward the end of this process, there's some other things you might do with this data that have been very, very popular in the last few years that have to do with the hardware management process. So basically, the idea is our client is gathering these hardware details to include the installed software, your asset details, and any of your hardware configuration information might be useful to get that into your ticketing system or service management tool. And so we also have some integrations, one with Team Dynamics, one with Jira, and one with ServiceNow that takes data from AllSight that our client is gathering, or that might be getting imported from other sources like Jamf or Intune or Spreadsheet. And now that you can get that data out into another tool that makes troubleshooting a help desk ticket much easier. For anything other than Team Dynamics, ServiceNow, and Jira, we also have a REST API, which I did not grab, but I'll show you another feature here. If you go to the help page, you can do a search of our online documentation. So if you didn't know, the search bar at the top of the page behaves differently depending on what page you're on. And so I could come here and search for REST API. And here's our documentation page. It takes you to a link to another page for the REST API. We're always interested in taking requests for additional integrations. Currently, those are the only 3 we have. Our REST API is full access, read, write. There's another relevant page here called tables in the documentation that might also be of use. This is going to show you all the database tables, field labels, field types, maximum characters, all that kind of stuff is fully documented here. Okay. End of life. I'm going to kind of refer you, I talked a little bit about it in terms of warranty dates. I didn't mention the hardware replacement script here, but that's another thing that can kind of auto-populate your replacement date based on the warranty date. So set replacement date. You can either kind of do that automatically based on a specific date or relative to a specific date. You can also base your replacement date on the warranty date or the purchase date, where you add some additional months after one of those dates. So there's some cool options here to auto-populate the replacement date. And then, of course, you've got that replacement date widget on the dashboard I mentioned, and then the hardware replacement extra toward that end of life process where you can project replacement costs for your various computer groups. That's everything in the AllSight interface here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to give you that look at the upcoming app now. All right. So this is your first look at the app, and you see there's some tabs down at the bottom where you can actually scan. One cool feature that's going to be available in the app is the ability to have a barcode like at the entrance to a room, where when you scan that barcode, it will actually select that location for you. So here on this location selection page, I could click that little camera icon at the top to scan a barcode that will be based on that location. Or I can choose from my divisions list, which we saw on the computers page, where we've got sections and divisions. But when you're doing inventory, it's really kind of a physical location process. So if you're using our lab maps functionality, you could also use, choose a map and choose a location from the map. And then there's a way to kind of sort maps by proximity. And I think we might have a way to, based on your phone's location services, kind of give you a list of locations. But in this case, I'm just going to select a location here from the main campus map, this makerspace location. And we've got some options here. So remember, this is inventory. So we're going through and we are going out to a physical location and we're scanning barcodes, we're scanning QR codes, or we're visually checking to make sure that each device is where it's supposed to be. So these are the defaults. When I scan or tell the system, yes, this is in this location, I can set some defaults. I can set the lifecycle stage to, let's say, deployed if I needed to change that. Again, one use case for this app might be computers have come in and I'm sort of setting these fields initially just to tell the system where they should be. So if there's a department, again, we've got the dependencies with these fields. So the New England region, and let's say this is in Adams Lab 1. So these are going to be my defaults when I scan them. I'm going to update the inventory status. And this update associated device, the client has the ability to discover monitors, storage drives, as well as USB connected printers. And so it will create an asset record on the devices page for those devices. This toggle will update those same fields, those asset location fields and other fields for any linked devices as well. So if you want to set the printer location that's connected to this computer, when you scan the computer in, you can do that. And now one thing I want to do here before I start scanning is reset the inventory flag. So I'll turn that on so that when I come to this page, we see all of our computers are ready to be inventoried, except for the one here that was previously discovered in another location. So I'm going to cancel out of here. Or actually, no, I guess it was marked as lost. So it's set to be found. All right. So that one has a red flag because it's set to be found. And we didn't reset that flag when we reset everything else. So now I could either click the scan button at the bottom and go scan the QR codes to inventory the devices into this room, or I can just select them one at a time. In red, it's showing me what's going to change. Click confirm and go to the next one. So very simple. If there's something that I need to change manually, I can click edit and it's going to allow me to make other manual changes to the location or other details about that asset. Save those changes and then click through to confirm the rest of the devices in this location. And once I'm done, I go to the next location. I either scan the barcode or find that location in the app and I can scan the other locations. So same with devices. There are also some other settings and options here within the app, but it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And I'll just show you one last thing. I'll share my screen one more time to show you here in a computer details. If we go back to that asset tab, I didn't mention it before, but there's that inventory flag, and I can manually edit these here if I wanted to. So this is kind of saying, okay, yes, it's in the location. So that's what's changing when you confirm it, in addition to these other location fields that you might change. You can add notes. That's also in the app, but this is kind of that main thing. And then the inventory action is being set if you need to move it, some approval is needed, or if it's lost and you need to locate it. These three are kind of the inventory actions. And then if everything is fine, you're basically setting this flag to inventoried. And when you reset it, obviously that turns that off for that whole computer group when you go to initiate the inventory process. So I hope that all kind of makes sense where we're headed with that. If you have any thoughts, questions, feedback, definitely feel free. That's everything that we were hoping to show you, but I hope this has been interesting.